Hello and welcome to this latest Autovista24 webinar, Specification Trends 2021 to 2025, the equipment must-haves and differentiators on new and used car markets. I'm Phil Curry, I'm the editor of Autovista24, and in today's session we're going to be covering specification dynamics and evolution, trends in Europe's automotive markets, current and imminent strategies, followed by a quick summary and then a Q&A session at the end. Now, on the right-hand side of your screen, there is a box marked questions. Please do feel free to use it and we'll answer them in our Q&A session. If we don't get time to, don't worry, we'll try and get back to you after this session has finished. And we are recording this session and it will be made available to you together with the slide deck once this webinar has finished. Now, before we move on, I just want to bring up Autovista24. This is your one-stop shop for the latest news, features, data-driven articles, and multimedia pieces. Now, I'm sure you're all here because you know all about Autovista24, but if not, please visit autovista24.com. And while you're there, don't forget to sign up to the free daily email, which brings all of our great content direct to your inbox every morning. Now, I am joined by a plethora of experts from across Autovista Group. We have Dr. Christoph Engelskirchen, our Chief Economist, Christian Schneider, who is Head of Analytics, Zsolt Horváth, who is Regional Head of Valuations for Czechia, Croatia, Hungary, Romania, Serbia, Slovakia, and Slovenia, Anna Zofra, Regional Head of Valuation and Insights for Spain, Portugal, and Italy, and Jennifer Bilishek, who is Product Manager of Car to Market and Consulting. Thank you all very much for joining me. Now, before we get into the main part of this session, I'd like to ask you, attendees, a question. For which one of the following features will customers be most willing to pay a monthly subscription fee? This is a poll that we'd like you to take part in. We have options such as smartphone integration, increased range in the battery electric vehicle, premium advanced driver assistance systems, extra horsepower, or none of the above. So if we could ask you just to vote now, we'll keep this on screen for just a couple of moments. I think we'll move on actually because that's the wrong poll question. So we'll move on from that one. We may come back to that a little bit later on. But this is a question that is being asked by OEMs across the world, and it is a very complex one that we hope to shed a bit more light on today. So we'll move first into our first session, which is specification dynamics, the evolution from can have to must have. And Christoph, if I may come to you first, what are the current challenges facing OEMs when it comes to equipment strategies, and what has changed? Well, Christoph, sorry, you're on mute there, I think.
Sorry, Phil. Yes, I mean the biggest challenge for the automotive industry is that on the one hand they are needing to basically cut costs. They need to decrease the complexity in their specification strategies from a production perspective to save costs. But at the same time, that you can see on the chart, the complexity is actually increasing and has been increasing over time. And we also expect it to continue to increase over the coming years due to various reasons. So, for example, when you look at the model variants, which is the orange bars in the chart, we expect these codes, as we call them, so we code these model variants in our systems, those codes to rise further slightly. And the reason for this is that we have new body types and a lot of new brands that are bringing new variants into the market, although of course the powertrain variety will decrease a little bit. If you look at equipment, which is obviously also tied to model variants, we see a stronger rising of codes and choices here because there is more technology that is available to be built into a car around connectivity, infotainment, advanced driver's assistance systems, for example. And also, and this might be a bit counterintuitive, the build rules, they are also becoming more complex to model in the systems, especially because many OEMs are moving to a very flexible trim plus option package strategy and are changing this quite frequently. And every time there is a change, every time there is a creative move in terms of pricing and packaging, that creates complexity also for remarketing. And of course, we believe that this new choice that is being available to automotive OEMs, but also to buyers, is fantastic for the industry. It gives a lot of opportunities to earn money. We do see that there are trade-offs that need to be made, especially in light of EV technology that is already very expensive. And you know, cars cannot have all the technologies and features built into them, because at some point the pricing becomes prohibitive. So that's the trade-offs that are being discussed at the moment.
Can you elaborate a bit more on these trade-offs?
Yes. So if we move to the next slide, we've selected here a picture from or two pictures from the Volkswagen Group. On the left side, you see the ID.3. And on the right side, you see the current generation Golf. And if you've been in both cars, you do recognize a substantial difference in terms of material quality, perceived quality of the material mix. That's one side of the trade-off. So Volkswagen, for example, and you know, we could have picked other pairs here. They're saving money, in choice of materials. But at the same time, what Volkswagen did is they added new technology into the ID.3 that is a USP, a halo feature that no one else can offer, and that is, for example, the augmented reality head-up display. And when we move this back into specification strategies, it's I think it's a good move on new car markets, but on used car market, it is only then a good move if the take rates for that feature become very high, because then 3-4 years down the road, that will be a true differentiator also in used car markets. Range won't be, design won't be. There are other cars coming into market that may beat the ID.3 in that area.
Christoph, thank you. And Christian, if I can come to you now, it must be difficult for car makers to adapt to new technology trends. Take satellite navigation, for example. Does there need to be thought given to integration with other devices, say, for example, smartphones, and in particular their operating systems?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Phil. That's a great question, I think. Maybe before I start with a correct answer to that, or a specific answer to that, maybe because the slide is maybe not that intuitive to understand. So what you can see here is developments, what we can observe in the used car market of take rates of two features. One is smartphone integration, so mainly Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and the other one is classical sat-nav navigation. And you can see it, the development over time, over first registration years, meaning we have relatively old cars on the left side of the chart and younger cars on the right side of the car of the slide. And what we can see is that the classical sat-nav navigation system is almost stagnating more or less at around 30–40% in the smaller segments. Smaller segments is mainly AB segment cars. While the much newer technology, smartphone integration, was booming a lot. And a main reason, of course, for that is that A and B segment car buyers are normally way younger than for higher segments, and they tend to, let's say, have married their smartphone for the whole life. And this is, of course, also why they want to have this technology, their friends, their favorites, their favorite apps, always with them, always in their cars. And this is why we see this booming trend. And also, maybe to give another component into this as well is, what we also see in our data is that in higher segments, so bigger cars like DE segment, for example, of course, sat-nav take rates are way higher. And we normally know from the past that features or take rates are washing through from higher segments to lower. So if you take a feature like air condition, for example, it was just a super luxury feature 40 years or 30 years ago, and then it was washing through also to smaller segments. And now it's definitely a must-have also in A segment cars. And with this super fast developing technologies, like the smartphone integration coming now into the market and pushing, this old rule is getting a little bit obsolete, what we can see here.
Excellent. So, I mean, do you mean specification trends will be even harder to be predicted than in the past?
Yes, exactly. So if we look on the next slide, we see another example that old rules, like I mentioned, are not applicable so much like in the past. Yeah. So I mean, in the past it was always like washing through from bigger to smaller segments, maybe differentiating a little bit between segments, but now also a new component is coming in, and this is the whole topic of different fuel types with electrification. And what you can see here is the different take rates for ICE cars, so internal combustion engines, mainly diesel and petrol, plug-in hybrids, and battery electric vehicles. And we can definitely see that the take rate for a high-tech feature like a head-up display is nearly or more than the double for battery electric vehicles than for internal combustion cars, which is mainly, of course, also because of a different customer group and or buyer group for battery electric vehicles, which are way more technology affine than we see for diesel and petrol buyers. This is maybe not that surprising. What is maybe even more surprising than that is that for plug-in hybrids, we can definitely observe that the customers tend more to petrol and diesel car buying decisions than to the more technology affine battery electric buying decisions. This is maybe even more surprising, I guess.
Okay, so what feature will turn from the can have to the must have when it comes to equipment? What are we seeing in the trends and data?
So I think we need to cluster the features, the must-have features, a little bit into two groups. So three groups, sorry. So there are the must-have features which are applicable for, let's say, nearly all cars in the market. Then there is a group of must-have features that you definitely need to have if you want to have a more premium awareness in the market. And then I think we should also speak about must-have features for battery electric cars, because they can differ a lot from internal combustion engine features. Besides, for example, the already mentioned smartphone integration, which will, especially in smaller segments, definitely a must-have on the used car market in 3 years, roughly, I would say. So that meaning you need to build it, or the take rate has to be very high in the cars on the new car market already now to have good RV results in the future. Maybe to give also here a little bit more background, with must-have features for the take rates, that doesn't mean automatically that it always has to be a standard feature. That also means that it can be a standard feature, but it also could be an option which is available on a very attractive price to push the take rates quite high. And another must-have feature for, let's say, all cars in the market will be definitely also a rear view camera, especially for the bigger cars, and of course SUVs, which is even harder to see back and forth. And if you want to make a difference for more premium awarenessness, a big thing on the used car market will be definitely virtual cockpits. This is pushing premium awareness a lot, and additionally also more advanced light technologies like matrix and laser light. And for the battery electric vehicles, beside the heat pump, especially for non-pure city electric vehicles, a very important feature will be definitely a navigation system, but not just a normal one that we know for 20 years. It is definitely a more intelligent and smart navigation system, because especially when you want to travel longer distances, you need to have the full integration, the full navigation integration in your car, so that it can also take into account the charging status of the battery, where the next charging destination is, to plan properly the routes and make it as comfortable as possible to drive an EV for longer distances.
Excellent. Christoph, thank you very much for your time there. Do stick around, we have some questions already coming in. I'd now like to move on to our next segment of this webinar, which is the trends in Europe's biggest automotive markets.
And Phil, just one comment. So as soon as you want to, we could give the survey another try, yeah, if you want to.
Indeed, I think we'll come to that after the last session there, just to be certain. We'll move on. Anna, question for you. Have country differences become bigger or smaller over time in terms of what equipment is sought after by buyers?
Yeah, thank you, Phil. Well, the European car market has never been very uniform in demand, from the weight and image of the brand through the preferred car colors to something more relevant, such as the body styles. As an example, there is a lack of state or wagons in Italy and Spain, while in other European countries and even in Portugal, they are more common than sedans. And there are also more cabriolet cars in northern European countries than in southern ones. Then we also find some differences regarding car equipment and features, and some of them significant. For example, the dual climate control is a must in southern Europe, as is logical, and in contrast, elements such as heated cooled seats or heated steering wheel are almost irrelevant. And of course, buying power is different for consumers in Southern and Eastern Europe compared to Central or Northern Europe. People are more price sensitive in the South and the East.
Okay. So if they're more price sensitive in those regions, what does this mean for equipment and the willingness to pay for it?
Well, in the volume brand segment, sales of lower or entry-level versions are down. OEMs don't want to push them. There is a tendency to increase the volumes of medium and medium-high equipment. And the problem comes from the demand side, as not all countries are as willing to pay for this equipment, especially for safety equipment that the customer feels should be included free of charge. This is a problem mainly in Southern and Eastern Europe. On the other hand, in Central and Northern Europe, there is more demand for high level of equipment as more premium cars are bought and company cars have more weight in the market. The equipment profile is different and it's reasonable and expected to pay more for additional equipment in these segments. And there are also general trends which are common to all markets and closely linked to CAFE regulations and also to the search for efficiencies in car production. This general trend is leading to a simplification of a car's equipment configuration. The range of packs has been extended while the number of options has been reduced.
So what equipment is most sought after in Spain and Southern Europe?
Okay, if we move to, yeah, thank you. As you can see in this graph, the most demanded equipment in the new car market are ADAS, besides the basic, almost mandatory blind spot warning, automatic emergency braking, adaptive cruise control, and 360-degree camera park assist. Then connectivity is a must, built-in navigation system, and of course, Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. In terms of comfort, dual climate control is a must in South Europe, as we already mentioned. But nevertheless, as I mentioned before, medium equipment level works better in the new car market in this area. And however, the situation is completely different in the used car market. If we move to the next slide, yeah, in countries like Portugal, Italy, and Spain, the used car market gets a lot of low-equipped cars, some coming from rental, some coming from the leasing typical business edition. And there is a particular desire for, let's call it, Christmas tree cars. And let me clarify this. Christmas tree doesn't mean ambient lights, which are in fact not in demand. And neither does it mean that all used cars must be super equipped. It's just a different circumstance in these countries where very well-equipped cars hardly ever reach the used car market. Then an equipped used vehicle gains uniqueness and therefore attractiveness. More equipment helps to justify going for a used car. Furthermore, better equipped cars improve in turnover with a consequent positive economic impact. as they stick out positively. Again, more a phenomenon in Spain and the south than, for example, in Germany, where you have typically very well-equipped cars of lease, for example, from company car usage.
That's a very a festive slide there. I do like that one. Anna, thank you. Zsolt, we'll move on to you now. We've talked about price sensitivity and country differences, but we need to look a little bit differently at Eastern Europe, don't we? Because with the average car age being 14 years and older, it presents a slightly different challenge.
Thank you, Phil. Exactly. Some of the equipment discussions naturally hit our region later than others. However, equipment is highly important where the majority of the car market is the used car market. The CE markets are price sensitive, except the premium and luxury segment. Generally, the equipment strategy is different by sales channels. So company car sector that has approximately 65–70%, the companies have their internal job car regulation policy, including limitation of price and size. The user chooses a vehicle according to the size limitation, then check the price. If the price limit is still low, then order more options until reach the price limit. That's why sometimes the user just select an option because it is free and allowed by the company. Meanwhile, the private sector, more price sensitive, that's around just 30–35% of the total sales volume. The new private owner checks the price limitation and select the maximum size for its money, sometimes with lower trim level. So the private sector has more compromises on the equipment. There are slight differences in the region between these markets as well. Higher demands on equipment in general in Czechia, Hungary, Poland, Slovenia, and Slovakia. Meanwhile, lower equipped vehicles fit for the local demands in Bulgaria, Romania, and Serbia.
Okay. So you say most used internal combustion engine cars will go to Eastern Europe over the coming years. It's quite an opportunity, but could you elaborate a bit further? What are the must-haves in terms of equipment for used cars to sell better?
Yes, the volume of the used car export-import will continue to be high. There are some popular markets such as Poland or Romania where the quantity of the used car import is double or triple than the new car registration. The main factors for the used cars in the CE markets are the first one is the age, then the mileage, where dealer guarantee is expected. Then the third one is the technical condition, where also dealer guarantee is demanded. Then the fourth one is just the equipment. Some market-specific parameters can be observed, of course, such as LPG in Poland or plug-in hybrids in Hungary, where extra authority advantages can have of the plug-in cars. The minimal requirements naturally depend on the age and segment, but generally are still the electric air condition, power windows, radio with Bluetooth, and alarm system. Meanwhile, the nice-to-have on used cars is towing bar, additional winter tire set, distance sensors, and seat and steering wheel heating. But there are some elements that are not so attractive like before. For example, basic safety features, such as number of airbags, all-style entertainment, such as CD player, or interesting that the differences between the different type of the light alloy wheels do not matter. I mean, the light alloy wheels have their added value, of course, but the type of it in general does not matter. So if it was the cheaper light alloy wheel or the more expensive, nobody can check it after 4 years. And finally, customized paint or internal carpets also do not attractive. For example, some design elements that express the first owner's individuality, such special wood trim internally.
Excellent, Zsolt. Anna, again, thank you very much. Please do wait on for some questions that we've got coming in. Now, I think this would actually be a very good time to try and do our poll again. So if we can bring that up. And again, the question, for which one of the following features will customers be willing to pay a monthly subscription fee? We're looking at smartphone integration, increased range in a BEV, premium advanced driver assistance systems, extra horsepower, or perhaps none of the above. Now, obviously by a monthly subscription fee, we mean a platform similar to what we're seeing with maybe with streaming services, whereby users will get access to the feature throughout using continued regular payments. It's a question that we know is facing OEMs on a daily basis and a very complex one. But we're keen to know your thoughts now based on what you believe you're seeing in the market at the moment. especially when it comes to the connected car's ability to download and receive information through functions on demand, which is something we'll be discussing very shortly. So this type of question is certain to come up again, and we'll keep this open for just a minute or so longer. And again, really interested to know your thoughts. So again, is smartphone integration, increased range in a battery electric vehicle, premium advanced driver assistance systems, extra horsepower, or perhaps you have a different thought as to any of those that might be more important for customers who would be willing to pay a monthly subscription fee? We'll keep this open again just for a few seconds longer. And then we can see increased range in battery electric vehicles. And again, with this technology coming through onto the market more thoroughly these days, it's an interesting point to make that the range of a battery electric vehicle is key in many of the consumers' mind. So a really interesting thought there, and smartphone integration as well coming in second with 20%. Again, a key area when it comes to thinking about the entire infotainment system of the car. So thank you very much for your answers there. I will now move on to our third section, which is looking at current and imminent trend in specification strategies. Jennifer, if I can come to you, does complexity reduction in equipment strategies improve remarketing results?
Well, the question for me is more, is complexity really decreasing with the attempts we currently see on the market? And is this really making configurations simpler? And yes, maybe complexity is decreasing from an OEM perspective as they are packaging intelligently for production. But for customers and the industry, not really, because yeah, every OEM, every country, premium, non-premium brand, they all have different approaches to this topic. And from a customer perspective, less and better equipped trim lines, so less options combined with few packages, only partly make the configuration simpler. So yeah, it reduces choice, but it can be quite frustrating if you're forced into different packs and trims because you need a particular feature. And yeah, taking out the complexity, it can allow for a more accurate value assessment and an easier valuation, but only if the packs do not change frequently in terms of content, price, and country. Otherwise, it could be even, yeah, it could be riskier, as the fun pack does not mean anything in Poland. And if the trims are and packs are stable, it helps the algorithm to capture the true value added. But if the trims and packs then change frequently, accuracy will suffer. So it makes then the whole value assessment on all sides unnecessarily difficult, I would say. So in the end, coming back to your initial question, complexity reduction can improve remarketing results, and it can for sure also benefit the remarketing across borders, but only if the OEM does not change content, prices frequently, and choose the right feature per trim and package out of the several possibilities we have nowadays. And this is the tricky bit. I mean, our data shows that the importance of features on the used car market really depends on segments, it depends on countries, and it even depends on brands.
Okay. So you mentioned there are various features and technologies available, some of them being more costly than others. How should an OEM prioritize between the abundance of these costly choices that they have to make?
I can fully understand that this is a super difficult decision for OEMs, and what I can give are some questions that that should guide the decision if features, and particularly the costly ones, should be offered or made standard. So this is it demanded on the new and used car market, or is it maybe superfluous and can help to reduce the costs? Is it maybe a must-have, limiting the RV potential if you do not offer it? Do maybe your main competitors offer it, and therefore it is important for you to have it? Or do you need it to achieve a differentiation versus rivals in this area, so to achieve a USP in this segment? And if you find answers to these questions, they can help you to reduce the risk that the cars lack important features or are over-equipped with the wrong features in the worst case.
So which strategic challenges does functions on demand as a new one equipment strategy present?
If we go to the next slide, yeah, perfect. FOD for sure offers new revenue potential over the life cycle, but if it is set up wrongly, it can also result in high financial loss. Looking, for example, at hardware investments, they have to be justified and also overcompensated by high take rates of functions on demand. And these take rates, they strongly depend on the price of FODs in questions and the customer's willingness to pay. So too high prices will put pressure on take rates, but if the prices are too low, they will not compensate the hardware costs. So OEMs need to decide which feature they want to offer as FOD and at what subscription price. And this is one of the major challenges. You cannot, for example, simply remove standard equipment and then make the feature available as FOD. That won't work.
Okay. So do you see other risks when setting up the FOD strategy?
The new car perspective, for example, is certainly important for defining the initial FOD offer. It can boost your image, and we see, for example, premium or near premium brands starting with such an offer. But the used car perspective is very often forgotten, and it might be even more crucial. So, yeah, looking from a used car perspective, it can change the picture and maybe your initially planned offer. So the used car buyers are always more price sensitive, and FOD features might be priced too high for them in the end. So OEMs need to have a very clear idea about the AVs of conventional and the FOD feature. And yeah, otherwise they are really running the risk of creating a pricing structure for their FODs, which will then negatively impact RVs of their FOD-enabled models, or they are selecting the wrong features right from the start, and this is not what we all want.
So on that, for example, is seat heating a good option for offering as a function on demand?
Well, no, it's not, sorry. We already saw in the beginning, or not in the beginning, it was now directly before we talked about FOD and some equipment strategies. We saw that we do not expect the same willingness to pay a subscription fee for each and every feature. So there are differences. And this already shows that FOD is a very complex topic and it's not as simple as you might think. So the decision around FOD, they require a very systematic analysis, a systematic approach. And this, yeah, you can also see it very nicely on the slide. Looking in more detail at the example of seat heating, this feature is in several segments already standard and it has a high take rate. So it's trivial offering such a feature as FOD, and it is also risky to take it out of the standard equipment because the base RVs for the cars would suffer from the reduced standard equipment, and RVs for optional FOD features cannot compensate this. And yeah, imagine that customers pay 100 times the price of a smartphone of a car. At such a price level, they don't want to be taken advantage of. And yeah, thus seat heating as FOD is not the best idea to choose.
Excellent. Jennifer, thank you very much. We're now going to move on to a very quick summary of our points today. So as we've discussed, OEMs have not really succeeded to reduce specification complexity. There's still complexity at an all-time high, and new margin pressure is just adding to the problem. And there's new sources of complexity as well. More expensive electric cars mean more equipment trade-offs. More trade-offs likely around ADAS, infotainment and connectivity, and functions on demand are not a quick win. There's also recent specification trends to consider. Smartphone integration overtaking built-in navigation, for example. And different specification trends for BEVs, including supply and demand induced. We need to cover the basics as well. So rear view cameras now becoming a must-have, for example. And more cross-border remarketing is going to be needed in the future, or awareness of this is needed in the future. There's rising importance of market differences. Known differences will become more relevant, for example, body style preferences. Price elasticity will be a challenge at times of rising used car values in Eastern Europe, and over-equipped cars remain a niche play and should be avoided. Now we're going to move on to our Q&A session. And again, if you haven't already, but if you do have any questions for our panel, please submit them in the box on the right-hand side of your screen. this is a really good opportunity to ask our panel some questions, and we will get back to you after this event if we don't ask it in this session. So the first question I have: do you see more software-based paid options where the hardware is already installed, but you have to pay to activate the features? Jennifer, can we maybe ask you that one?
Well, it's right. I mean, there are for sure some features that are easier to implement and also at less cost. So whenever we are talking about software functions, so where no specific additional hardware is necessary to build in every car, this could be a good option. It's the cheapest one for an OEM, but also here we need to be careful. I have in mind now smartphone integration, but as Christian already showed in the beginning, smartphone integration has already now a really high take rate, and it's almost expected being standard in a vehicle. So here I would not see a super good option of offering this software function then as function on demand.
Excellent. Our next question: do you consider the must-have are also country dependent, or do you consider the exposed trends to be applicable in all European markets? Christian, can we come to you for that one?
Yeah, that's a good one as well. And I think Anna already started touching on this, that it is definitely differing between countries. Is maybe too small, but at least between regions in Europe. I mean, there are other needs in northern European countries, for example, than in southern, like Anna mentioned, like the classical features are climate control and seat heating, steering wheel heating, and there are definitely differences between those countries, yeah, and regions. Yeah.
And if I could just add a comment here, there are these country differences, and there is a sequence, as Scholt said, between demand for certain features with a bit of delay in some countries. But the remarketing activities are becoming more and more cross-border over the next year. So it's more crucial than ever to put everything on the table and then make some smart and quite clever and forward-looking decisions around specification strategies to not miss out on some wonderful opportunities in the next 2-3 years for remarketing especially, for example, the ICE cars, the internal combustion engine cars.
Actually, Christoph, that brings me on to another question. Do we see differences in equipment preferences for BEVs versus ICE? Are there any specific differences that we need to monitor?
Sure.
Is this for me or Phil?
Christoph, sorry.
Okay. So I think if you look at it from one of the slides that I showed from that perspective, we do see that the classic approach of offering high quality material in a car is that's changing, for electric vehicles. Maybe it'll change again, but for the next 2, 3, 4 years, there's such a focus on reducing the price for that technology for very good reasons, because the prices must come down. So you have to have those trade-offs in place. So I do think that we will have more technology in electric vehicles, and Christian showed a slide showing quite nicely how people love the technology even more in electric vehicles. They are, they're looking for compensation, for that lack of, classic, stuff that used to matter. And that's happening especially in the battery electric vehicle area. Yes.
Okay. Anna, one for you here. Is seat heating a must-have feature in Spain?
Which one? Sorry.
Is seat heating a must-have feature?
Seven seats. No. Well. Well, I think 7 seats in an SUV or there are hardly MPVs now in the market is a very demand feature, and even considering that we have the lowest birth rate in Europe, I think, or the lowest or the second lowest birth rate, but people is really looking for this kind of features. And I think that the most important is There are some features that can lose some value because maybe people are not willing to pay a lot for this equipment, but they improve in turnover, and then it facilitates the sale of this used car. And we also have some more examples, like the sunroof or yeah, all these kind of things, special wheels.
Okay, and next question. Now, an impact of the semiconductor crisis may be that we can see cars being delivered without the touchscreen functions. So how would that impact the remarketing of these cars? Christian, again, another one for you.
So I think, to be honest, I don't believe that this will happen, that cars will arrive without a touchscreen function in the market because of that. I mean, I think before that happens, the cars are not arriving at the market at all, because if you don't have a touchscreen, you need, for example, buttons, or you need an iDrive system or whatever to build in the car to use the functionalities of the system. And this is not that easy to just change from one model year to the other to change the complete setup of your usability or UX design of the car. I think this. I don't think that this is a realistic case for the near future. Let's say it like this. Yeah.
And I mean, there's a point in that question. I think that we need to acknowledge that the used car markets will maybe look a little bit different, because OEMs have to prioritize certain equipment. So I also heard that, for example, automated rear door opening functionality. So such things are being taken out of the program, for chip shortage reasons. And yes, that will be visible on used car markets, but you always have to consider that that affects everyone. So it's not that one or the other brand are particularly more affected or negatively affected by this. So I think it'll wash through in the end and not be such a big challenge for used car remarketing.
Okay, and Jennifer, another question here for you. Could you give us an idea of one feature that will definitely be a must-have for function on demand?
A must-have for function on demand. Well, we can think about things like keyless entry, for example, keyless entry and go in segments where it is not expected or not being standard, because this is also a feature that is of or can be offered at low costs and without a very significant commercial risk independently then of the demand.
Another question in, do you expect any added value for real leather interiors in the higher segments? In many new battery electric vehicles, for example, we're seeing a trend towards vegan only interiors, and this is something that we're covering on Autovista24. Again, Christian, is that one you could field?
Yeah, I think so. I think this is, again, and you started already mentioning that it is a little bit different between the different fuel types, like you mentioned, for example. So as we see, the typical BEV buyer is a little bit more open for new technologies, but also maybe open for new materials. It's not that they are not that conventional. Conventional, it sounds a little bad, but I think you know what I mean. And classical maybe is a better word. So that means that especially for BEVs or for cars who want to be a little special, it doesn't have to be a BEV, it could be also an ICE or plug-in. Real leather will not play such a big role like in the past for like S-Class models, for example. So yeah, if this is answering your question.
And if I can add something to this, we also see that many OEMs are offering now this type of leather, and they are playing around with different materials. And this is definitely a trend that we see across almost all segments. And as I said, many brands are trying this. So I think that is a good trend, and it fits also to electric vehicles. As soon as it becomes the new normal, then I don't expect super high AV impacts, for example, of this kind of leather. Because then you do not really differ from the others. They are all offering it. Maybe then it matters more that it really touches nicely and has a really good quality, and your quality is then maybe better than that of another player.
Excellent. Thank you very much. That's all the time we have for our Q&A session. We've had a lot of questions in. So again, if you have submitted a question, don't worry, we're going to be doing our best to get back to you after this session has finished. If you have any further questions, however, the contact details of our presenters are on the screen now. And again, we're going to be making this recording and this slide deck available after this session has ended. So you don't have to worry about scribbling down their email addresses. You can have shortly afterwards. So that brings us to the end of today's session. Again, if you are interested in any of the data that's been presented, or you want to know anything more about the European market across the 5 largest markets, or some of the biggest segments, or even the biggest automotive brands, you can request a demo of our residual value intelligence. Tim Budgeon's details there on screen, so please, again, do get in touch. Thank you very much for joining us today. Don't forget to subscribe to the Autovista24 daily email, where you can keep up to date with the latest goings on in the automotive market, as well as being notified of our next webinars. Thanks very much.